Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session this morning. It's probably not the best way to start a session, but I'll start with an apology. We had a few IT issues this morning and joining issues, but I think we're all sorted now, and I'd like to welcome their Excellencies, the Irish Ambassador in India, Brendan Ward, and the Indian Ambassador to Ireland, Sandeep Kumar. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. The format this morning, and just for anyone who wishes, this is being recorded this morning. Anybody who wants to ask questions, just go into the Q&A function, and I will bring those questions to the ambassadors. The format will be that we will have some introductory remarks for between 5 and 10 minutes from each of the ambassadors, and then we'll basically have a fireside chat on the issues affecting and impacting on trade between our two countries. Just a very, very quick introduction. Ambassador Ward has been the Irish Ambassador to India since 2019. A bit of background: the Irish Embassy in India is the oldest Irish embassy in Asia, dating back to 1964. But the Ambassador Kumar both predates. He's an extra year's experience on Ambassador Ward. He's been in Ireland since 2018, and the Indian Embassy has been in Ireland since 1962. As an interesting aside on that, I'm currently reading a book by one Dervla Murphy, who cycled as a single lady from Ireland to India in 1963. A fascinating book. It took her 6 months to get there. And I think if we look at those historic connections of that over the years between our two countries, and unfortunately it's currently taking 6 months again maybe to get from Ireland to India at the moment, but hopefully that time will be shortened very, very soon. So maybe I'll pass over then to Ambassador Ward to say a few words first, and then we'll hear from Ambassador Kumar. Thanks, Brendan.
Well, good morning, everybody in Dublin. And first, let me thank the Ireland-India Business Association for giving me the opportunity to address this webinar. Relations between Ireland and India have been developing in many spheres over the past 20 years, and the business relationship between our two countries is one of the most important in Asia. My opening remarks on the business environment are mainly directed at Irish participants who might be interested in starting or in expanding business in India. But I shall be happy to answer questions from any participant on our work and on our support presence in India for investment and trade with Ireland. Well, first, I suppose I should mention the cloud that is hanging over all of us everywhere in the world: COVID. India has not been as badly affected as many countries in Europe, but there has still been a significant impact. Around 13.5 million people are known to have been infected, and around 170,000 people are known to have died from the disease. While obviously every individual death is a tragedy, these figures need to be seen in the context of a population of 1.4 billion people. India had a couple of advantages in dealing with the pandemic. First, less than 20% of the population is over 50 years old, which means 80% of the population are unlikely to be severely affected if they do become infected. Secondly, slum dwellers living in crowded, close-up conditions in the mega cities such as Mumbai and Delhi are routinely exposed to a wide range of viruses and pathogens, which appears to give them a greater resistance to COVID and means that many infections produce no symptoms. The response of the government to the pandemic was to impose a very strict nationwide lockdown in March 2020, which slowed the spread of the disease and made it easier to control. A gradual opening up of the country has been in progress since July 2020, but unfortunately, we're now seeing a surge in new infections, and it appears that herd immunity, which some scientists thought might have been achieved in the major cities, has not in fact happened. New restrictions have been announced in Delhi, Mumbai, and other cities, and are likely to remain in place for at least the next few weeks. The government is trying to minimize the impact of the new measures on the economy and on business activity, as the impact of the March 2020 lockdown was quite severe and saw a sharp reduction in GDP in 2020. Of course, India is also one of the main centers for the production of vaccine in the world, and a program of vaccination is well underway in all major cities. India is also making large quantities of vaccine available to neighboring countries, either as donations or at cost. Overall, we're fairly confident that India is far better placed to deal with the current surge than it was a year ago. Well, I already mentioned the economic impact of the pandemic. Now, in 2019, the economy grew at just under 5%, a decline from growth rates earlier in the decade. And in 2020, due to the lockdown, to the disruption of the global markets and other domestic factors, the economy contracted by 9.6%. In 2021, it is estimated that the economy will return to growth and will expand by up to 7.3%. With further growth likely in 2022. The government has undertaken measures to stimulate growth and consumption this year, but it is itself under severe pressure due to the sharp decline in revenue in 2020. And this sharp decline in revenue is even more strongly felt at the state level. The pandemic also revealed some weaknesses in global supply chains with which you are all familiar, not just in India. And the government is taking measures to address those. For political reasons unconnected to the pandemic, there is a strong desire to reduce dependence on China as a supplier of raw materials, components, and finished goods. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a policy of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, for those of you who, like myself, do not speak Hindi. He explained this as meaning a reorientation of supply chains and the further development and strengthening of Indian industry in key areas. However, as implemented so far, it seems to involve a lot of movement back to the bad old days. The government is promoting import substitution, and tariffs on imports have in numerous cases been raised, although it has to be said that they have been maintained within WTO bound rates. In her report to Congress, the United States Trade Representative said of India, a general and consistent trend of trade restrictive policies have inhibited the potential of the bilateral trade relationship. Recent Indian emphasis on import substitution through a Make in India campaign has epitomized the challenges facing the bilateral trade relationship. I don't think any country currently trading with India would seriously disagree with that assessment. India has also become reluctant to engage in regional efforts to promote free trade and decided against participating in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was concluded in late 2020 and established a free trade area among 15 Asian countries, including China, Japan, and Australia. There may, of course, indeed there are, quite strong arguments which resonate domestically against India's participation in that partnership, but it does seem to be worryingly indicative of a wider policy approach. Negotiations on a free trade agreement have also been opened between India and the European Union, and indeed there was a high-level dialogue on economic relations in February of this year, and it's expected that another high-level dialogue at official level will be held before the heads of state and government meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the heads and state of government of the European Union, due to take place in Porto, in Portugal, in May of this year. But frankly, there seems little prospect of a significant free trade agreement being concluded between India and the European Union in the next few years. But in spite of these above points, of which I think everybody needs to be aware, it has to be acknowledged that India is now the 6th largest economy in the world, and that within a couple of years, it can be expected to resume a steady upward growth trajectory. The government had a target of being a $5 trillion economy, roughly twice its current size, by 2025. And while this is not going to be achieved in current circumstances, it remains a plausible objective for 2030. The bulk of Irish commerce with India is in services, which are less subject to barriers than goods, and we can confidently expect that as the economy grows, the demand for goods and services will both expand. The Government of Ireland sees a bright future for our economic relations with India, and we're eager to support business in both directions. In addition to the embassy in Delhi, we've established a new consulate general in Mumbai in early 2019, Mumbai being, of course, the business capital, and Enterprise Ireland, IDA, and Tourism Ireland also have offices in Mumbai, which are located in our new Ireland House together with the consulate. We also have honorary consuls who are themselves prominent business people in the major business cities of Bengaluru, Chennai, and Kolkata. Our visa office in Delhi is the largest and the busiest in the world, as the number of Indians traveling to Ireland, currently around 30,000, is increasing by around 10% a year. We are in regular contact with some companies and sectoral organizations about growing their links with India, and we would hope that we might see many more taking the plunge in the next few years. Thank you for your attention, and I shall be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for those words, and now we'll pass over to Ambassador Kumar to make some opening comments as well. Sandeep, thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Thank you.
Liam, thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to you for organizing this. This is a good way to strategize on the India-Ireland business partnership, particularly post-COVID period. I'm also encouraged that there will be an announcement soon regarding the IIBA branch being opened in India as well, which will have companies representing sectors which have been identified as potential areas of collaboration between India and Ireland. So we would be very welcoming of that, and the embassy looks forward to establishing a more robust partnership with IIBA. And the fact that now we are based in Dublin gives us that added advantage to be able to liaise more effectively with you, not just at the Dublin level, but also at the provincial level. Because even during the pandemic, as conditions permitted, I have been traveling to the different counties in Ireland. I have been meeting with the chambers of economy, with the local TDs, with the political leadership, local entrepreneurs, and they have all expressed interest in IIBA having a more robust presence through webinars, through Know India talks, seminars, conferences at the provincial level, and we look forward to undertaking some of those projects together with IIBA and the Indian companies which are represented in IIBA. I won't repeat what Brendan Ward has already mentioned very eloquently. We all understand that the story of India-Ireland partnership is one of collaboration, friendly relations which have historic roots, and covering a broad sector of areas, business of course, but also education, sports, science, culture, etc. And the whole effort has been to take it to a higher level in all these fields. And coming to COVID and the post-COVID collaboration, I would give a little bit more positive spin to say that currently the IMF has revised its projection for GDP growth for India for 2021 for at 12.5%, which is almost double than the global growth that it has projected, and even more than the growth for China. And as we all know, that China was the only country which recorded a positive growth last year. And we all understand that there are significant challenges posed by the pandemic, as well as even outside that framework for India, which has not just regional aspirations, but also global aspirations. But the whole focus and the theme is to be able to build opportunities out of challenges. And that is what all the embassies abroad have been asked to do. And we got the first hint of this collaboration when last year Prime Minister Modi had a telecon with the former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, in which the areas of collaboration post-COVID identified were pharmaceuticals and medtech, and the pandemic management, infrastructure, and logistics. And there was also a great appreciation for the role of the Indian healthcare workers in Ireland, contributing to the healthcare systems throughout the country. And I'm pleased to note that even over the last year, there has been significant recruitment of Indian healthcare workers, particularly from Kerala, and they have been positioned in various medical institutions throughout Ireland. And I have visited some of these and I have met with them, and they're all very excited to come to Ireland at this phase and to contribute to the healthcare systems in Ireland. So I think despite the challenges that Brendan very aptly pointed out, we are excited at the new opportunities which are coming our way. And these new opportunities would be looking at the strengths of both our countries, particularly in frontier areas of collaboration. And here I mean ICT, whether it is artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, security solutions, blockchain technologies, VR applications, geotracing. All of these today become extremely relevant under the new normal of doing business post-pandemic. And we all understand that Ireland itself has been the hub of ICT within the EU. The software development sector has been done from Ireland. And here, even within Ireland itself, despite the pandemic and despite the contraction in the growth, this was buffeted to a large extent by the exports that had continued to register positively in the field of pharmaceuticals and ICT exports to European Union and to the world. And India itself over the last 20 years has been making great strides in the field of ICT. So these are the frontier area that both our countries can come together, and some of our Indian companies are already positioned here, whether it is TCS, Tech Mahindra, and we all understand and we've read in the newspapers that both Tech Mahindra and TCS have actually expanded operations over the last year. We know that TCS it acquired 1,500 jobs in Prudential Financial Limited in the subsidiary in Letterkenny and taking over some of its stakes. And more recently, in February, we heard that Tech Mahindra has acquired 70% stake in Perigord, and the remaining stakes will be acquired as the financial situation permits. So these companies are looking at Ireland in these fields, and this also becomes important in the post-Brexit phase, which coincides with the post-pandemic phase, where Ireland is being seen as a country offering opportunities because it has distinct advantages, the low corporate tax of 12.5%, common law system, very strong linkages with the UK, a highly qualified workforce, pro-enterprise government policy. So all these factors are important factors for the Indian companies to be able to look at Ireland very seriously. And I know that there are some other countries in UK which are looking to expand operations, because Ireland provides a bridge also to the larger European Union, where they have access to 44 million consumers and a labor market of more than 26 million. And then we also have Ireland positioned as the gateway for transatlantic US. So all these are very important aspects. Brendan talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the self-reliant India, and the whole focus is on that to be able to, and I must hasten to emphasize that self-reliant India is not about looking inwards, although it has ramifications of that, but also to be able to contribute more effectively to the global supply chains which were disrupted during the time of the pandemic, and to provide some mechanism of diversifying those supply chains. And in the healthcare sector itself, if India and Ireland can better integrate the healthcare infrastructure for better manufacturing and supply, we would be on a good wicket. So healthcare, medtech, and I know that some Indian scientists in Ireland are doing some amazing work in medtech with funding from European Union. So this becomes trilateral collaboration, EU, Ireland, and India. And talking about EU, we are very committed to taking forward the free trade and investment agreement with the European Union. Brendan Watt spoke about the upcoming May Heads of Government Summit. India is very willing to show flexibility in those negotiations. But what we are demanding right now is for EU to also come on board to show flexibility, and somehow we don't see that at this point in time. So the appeal is to all governments, including the Irish government, to at least come on board to be able to make a formal announcement at the May summit to commence the EU-India free trade and investment negotiations, which will cover a whole gamut of issues, and these negotiations have been going on for a long time. I would also like to mention that in the current phase, what becomes extremely important is the exchange in tourism, and particularly the healthcare and wellness tourism becomes extremely important. Brenda, you talked about the immunity systems in India, and I think some of those lifestyle systems and products, whether it is Indian herbs, spices, whether it is yoga, and we have been celebrating International Day of Yoga since 2014. These are some of the aspects that we need to be looking into, and tourism covers all that. We have also been looking at chairs of yoga and Hindi and Sanskrit in various universities. And I'm also happy to say that Indian Council for Cultural Relations has agreed to establish an additional chair at one of the universities in Ireland. We have yet to identify that in international relations and India studies, which would also cover the Indian systems and way of life. We already have a temporary chair of India studies at DCU, which is going very well. We could not get a professor last year, but we hope to be able to get someone this year. And we need to link research universities with businesses, and that's why last year I started a program of bringing the heads of Indian companies together with the research departments of various universities in Ireland, so that they could link up and the research could be connected to the industry. I look forward to taking this initiative forward as conditions permit. And apart from the level of collaboration at the national level, bilateral level, EU level, both our countries also have global ambitions. And this also relates to economy and trade and industrial and innovation sectors. And as we know that you're in the UNSC, we have both taken our seats for the concurrent terms of 2021 and 2022, which will provide an opportunity to work on the common agenda of climate change, green investments, on peacekeeping, which is where Ireland has great strengths, and so does India, women empowerment, and sustainable development, and various other themes where we can make a difference. And literally, we are sitting shoulder to shoulder in these UNSC table because of both India and Ireland starting with I, so we get seats next to each other. We have had discussions between the two sides on how to advance our common agenda, and any feedback that we can get from the business in advancing our agenda at the UNSC level would also be very, very helpful. And lastly, I would like to say that we are looking at finalizing certain agreements bilaterally, whether it is migration and mobility agreement, whether it is the education exchange agreement, which is pending for a long time, or a social security protection agreement between the two sides, which will all provide the impetus for enhancement of business ties. We are also looking at high-level visits, hopefully at the end of this year or next year, whether it is the Indian president to come to Ireland. The talks are underway in consideration. There is a long pending invitation for the Taoiseach to visit India. And when that happens, it would happen at, together with delegations in the field of education, business, science, and technology, so that it can really give a consolidated fillip to the level of relationship between India and Ireland. I would just like to say that we are excited at this new phase, opportunities out of challenges. And now it is for the business to show the pragmatism to go and think out of the box, to take certain risks, to get out into markets which may be unknown to them in the past. We have around 180 Irish companies which are already in India, and we have about 110 Indian companies which are in Ireland. But there is room for expanding this, and the embassy is fully committed to working with IIBA and all other business stakeholders in Dublin and at the provincial level to be able to take our partnership forward. In whatever we do today, we are judged not by the level of political warmth that exists in the two countries. That is evident. But we are going to be judged by the amount of investments, technology, and know-how that we can bring to the table. So with this, I will end, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Sandeep. And maybe I think going back to maybe Brennan for a moment, you covered a lot of sectors and that are quite, I suppose, happening, certainly from an India-Ireland corridor. From an Ireland-India corridor, Brennan, which sectors do you see as being kind of, I suppose, hot sectors at the moment for Irish businesses, and what do you see happening on the Indian side of that equation at the moment?
Well, again, it is to a very large extent dependent on the Indian government, the Indian economy moving back into sustained growth. Major sectors which are fairly important are obviously education, also financial services, also cooperation between development institutions and universities in major economic areas in both India and Ireland, such as fintech, pharma, life sciences, biosciences, and other areas which are growing in both of our countries. There is a certain amount of opportunity for synergies there. And as Sandeep has mentioned, a number of major Indian companies in all of these areas are active and expanding in Ireland at the moment. But of course, everything does depend both on the return to normality in India and the return to normality in Ireland.
Thanks, Brendan. And one question that often comes up, and I'll ask you, Brendan, and then maybe Sandeep to cover from the other angle, is, I suppose, the profile of our two countries in each other's from a business point of view and from a trade perspective, and the importance of that. Certainly, the cultural importance and the cultural profile is high. But from a business and trade point of view, what are you saying? As you said, Brendan, Ireland has set up general consulates in Mumbai, and I think in some other cities and that at the moment. I suppose two questions is, one, where do you see that profile sitting at the moment? And secondly, what more can be done on that? And indeed, if you had any suggestions for the IIBA or the IIBA India chapter, and that would be welcome as well.
Well, I have to be brutally honest. and say that Ireland, a smallish country of around 5 million people, is almost completely unknown to most Indians. We do, of course, I mean, among educated Indians, there is an awareness of our common independence movement in the first half of the 20th century. There is an awareness among literature-loving Indians of many Irish writers. There is in the business community, particularly since Brexit was announced 5 years ago, an awareness of Ireland as a destination for people looking for European bases or to access the European Union market. But the reality is that for the vast majority of Indians, Ireland remains unknown. Now, making a change to that is a major part of our work here. And we do engage regularly. In normal times, would be speaking regularly at industry and business events, at the universities, and engaging with the Indian media to raise awareness of Ireland. But actually, one of the areas which is most important is sport. And the very positive development of the Irish cricket team over the last decade or so has probably done more than anything else to raise awareness of Ireland. So I don't know, perhaps if the IIBA would like to sponsor a cricket tour of India, that might perhaps do more to raise our profile than anything else I can think of.
So certainly, if the IIBA could obtain sponsorship itself, it might be happy to do that. Maybe Sandeep, maybe from the other angle, from the point of view of the profile of India business in Ireland, and also maybe the profile of Ireland as that gateway to Europe following Brexit. I have had experience of being in India and people not necessarily seeing the distinction between Ireland and the UK, shall we say. And I just wonder, do you see that improving, and do you see Ireland playing that role? You talked a little bit about it in your introductory remarks.
Yeah, and Liam, even if I could just add also to your previous question about the profile of India, which builds up that interest for business relationship. Maybe I'm luckier because India is maybe better known in Ireland and Ireland may be known in India. And we are using our soft power or trying to use our soft power more effectively to be able to promote awareness about India and the Indian way of life. And this I'm talking about Bollywood, we are talking about Indian cinema. Every year there is an Indian Film Festival, which is now gaining traction across all cross sections of Irish society, not just the Indian community which is here, which is helpful. I'm talking about yoga. And in the 2 years ago when I came, we had a big international day of yoga right bang in the heart of Dublin in Grand Canal Square, and Sabina Higgins was the chief guest. And she made a passionate plea for yoga to be incorporated in the core school curriculum in Ireland, which is a huge message. And we've been working with the Department of Health and Education together with other yoga institutes to be able to affect that. We'd also be happy to know that this year, the Indian Council for Cultural Relations Sanskrit World Award 2020 went to an Irish citizen, Rutger Kurtenhorst from John Scotter's School, which has been teaching Sanskrit since its inception in the 1980s, which was a huge fillip for Ireland. And then you have the large Indian community here, around 45,000 or so, which are the best ambassadors. They form the bridge between India and Ireland, and through contributing to the Irish society. They are also creating awareness about Indian culture, Indian art forms, etc. We have a Gurudwara, the Sikh temple here, which has been there for decades. There is now a dedicated Hindu temple as well, which has opened. And this is also linked in with the multicultural plurality of Irish society, which resonates so well with our own unity and diversity agenda. So, we are trying to use the soft power aspects as well, which then creates a more solid board base for understanding and more comfort. The zone is created for Irish businesses to do business in India. You spoke about Ireland being a gateway for getting into European Union and also transatlantic US, and that has been the whole focus. The Irish government itself has approached us on a few occasions to say that once the UK exits EU, Ireland should be the speak-to country after that. And this is the message we are trying to send out to Indian businesses because of the various distinct advantages that I already mentioned. Some of the Indian companies are already expanding operations here precisely because they can use Ireland then as a base for getting into the EU market and get that 46 million strong consumer market. The Indian government has also identified 57 or so GI products which can be relevant for the Irish consumers as well as for the EU consumers. So whatever the Indian industry is doing in Ireland, it is both for the Irish market and for the EU market. And you would agree that Ireland, being such an important country within the European Union, one of the strongest economically, this is helpful. So we will continue to work on that, and we will continue to tout these advantages of Ireland, because then it's for our mutual advantage that we take this forward.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question in, and it's just in relation to the advantages for smaller companies, maybe smaller Indian companies setting up in Ireland, and where those advantages might come from. And I'm conscious in relation to, there's been some discussion here on openness of international trade and supply chains and that versus maybe a growing protectionism in some parts of the world versus open supply chains. I'm also conscious that the very open position, I think, taken by the Irish government in relation to vaccines and the export of vaccines from the EU, where it took a very strong line on one side of that particular debate of keeping supply chains open. And I wonder, does that fit into the question even for smaller companies of that advantage of being able to, I suppose, have an investment or trade through countries such as Ireland, which are small and have no vested interest in anything other than facilitating that sort of international trade. Maybe that's one advantage. Just maybe Brendan, would you have any comments on that? Maybe for smaller companies coming into Ireland, and then maybe Sandeep could take that up afterwards.
Sure, I would. I mean, one thing for smaller companies looking at Ireland is the fact that the vast majority of Irish-owned companies operating in Ireland are themselves fairly small. And so there is, as both Sandeep and I have mentioned, Ireland offers a very business-friendly environment, but is equally friendly for the smaller types of company. I mean, the benefits of investing in Ireland are fairly obvious. They're reasonably well known. There is a skilled and educated workforce. There is a business-friendly tax regime. There is unhindered access to the entire European market. And there is the possibility of employing personnel from the 27 European Union member states and also from the United Kingdom. I think this is a question, since it's coming from a particular company, that probably requires a slightly more specific answer. And I would suggest that Neeraj should perhaps contact the IIBA office in Mumbai, which will have the full range of information on all the advantages and benefits of investing in Ireland, and the help which IDA can offer to companies looking at investing in Ireland. And there are a wide range of assistances which we are prepared to offer foreign companies which are looking at Ireland as a base.
Thanks, Brendan. Actually, Sandeep, I might just move that question on a little bit to one that's just come in there, which is there an Indian equivalent of the IDA, if you like, looking at inward investment in India and providing grants or supports or services for, let's say, Irish companies looking to invest in India?
Liam, firstly, I would like to, put on the table my great sense of appreciation for the IDA and the Enterprise Ireland office of the Irish Embassy in Mumbai. They are doing fantastic work. Every time we reach out to them, they respond very efficiently, and we are very encouraged by the kind of work they are doing, and which is also inciting both big and small and medium enterprises to come into Ireland. With respect, and I would just, and I'm glad you raised the question about the counterpart agency, because we would want more small and medium enterprises from Ireland to also get into India to invest there. There is Invest India, which is looking at all aspects, but more so at the provincial level. There are also investment boards, and all on their website there are various schemes which are mentioned for attracting investments in various sectors. What are the challenges? It's always good to also have a local partner. When you invest in India, it is a complex country, but there has to be a little bit of risk-taking. There has to be pragmatism. There has to be creative, out-of-the-box thinking for businesses also to be getting into India. And the embassy here would be very happy to facilitate the initial contacts for the small and medium enterprises, and the development of small and intermediate SME sector is a major focus both of the Irish and the Indian governments, and we are committed to taking this forward.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. Maybe a question just coming in for Brendan there, and it's in relation to, I suppose, one of the things which we've suffered from in the last year is the movement of people around the world and the building of new relationships and whatever else. And I suppose one of the questions as the Irish economy also continues to grow is getting the people in to feed that. And there's just a question there as to, is there any line of sight on the visa processing for Indian nationals? Doom as yet, Brendan, given the current state of lockdowns, etc.
Yeah, I've actually typed an answer to that question there, but just to reprise, we are currently issuing visas to people for certain categories of employment. Obviously, the most important is for healthcare workers. And in the past month, we've issued something like 117 new visas to Indian health professionals who are traveling to Ireland. It is also possible for other key workers to obtain visas at the present time, and guidance on what constitutes a key worker, or if you have a particular case which may not be typical, guidance can be got from the Irish, the INIS, the Immigration Service in Dublin. For more general return to service, the actual date will depend on the COVID situation in both Ireland and India. We would be hopeful that normal service will resume towards the end of May. But as I say, that is a decision that will be taken in Dublin, not in Delhi, and will apply to all of our missions and visa offices around the world.
Thank you, Brendan. We have sorry.
Yeah, may I just add also that as respect to the visa issuing process at the Indian Embassy, even currently during the time of the pandemic, we are issuing business visas, short term, long term, and we are issuing them in 2 days flat. So businesses are very welcome to approach us for any business issues, and we will be issuing visas. We will continue to do that. And I would also here, I was wanting to mention this as a systemic issue, that the Indian Embassy, issues visas of all categories: tourism, family visits, business visas, etc. And we just issue them in 2 days flat in most cases. While in the Irish side, we fully understand that there are compulsions security issues, etc., which we also face. But there is also, since Brendan is gone, the visa process had been expedited until pandemic hit. But at the government level, I would request IIBA to also be taking up this issue at various levels of the government to expedite on an institutional basis the visa issuing process, so that there can be some reciprocity between the issuance of visas by the Indian embassy in Dublin and the Irish embassy. Although we are both trying our best to to adhere to the rules and to cater to the largest business community as possible. But it's just a request to the IIBA to partner with us in leveraging this issue at the topmost levels in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Home Affairs.
Thank you, Sandeep. And the questions are coming thick and fast here. If you can see them coming in, I'm trying to get through as many of them as I can before the end. But one thing, just to move a little bit aside, and the importance of the political connections between the two countries. I noticed over the weekend some thought process coming out of the US about some sort of creation of a concert of great nations or great powers to run world affairs, which is kind of a kickback to a concept that's a couple of hundred years old. But I did notice that in the five that they mentioned, India was one of them. Clearly, Ireland are disappointed at not being mentioned among those as well. But leaving that aside, Ireland and India are also on the UN Security Council as well at the moment. Maybe just some comments on the importance of those political relations between the countries, how they feed into the more general discussion on trade and business. And are there any upcoming visits or any upcoming delegations or that planned at the moment, or certainly when things open up a little bit? Maybe we'll start with Sandeep and then go with Brendan on that.
The basis of our relationship is rooted in our historical political relationship. When we had the contacts during our common freedom struggle movements between our political leaders, we also our literary giants, Yeats and Rabindranath Tagore. We had the Irish educationists, the convent schools which were set up in India, which continue to run even today. And a lot of my friends have studied in these presentation convents and carry those traditions and values of that English teaching structures. So there has been a huge political level of commitment, and as you yourself mentioned that the Irish embassy opened its embassy in New Delhi in '64, which was the first embassy in any Asian country in Ireland when it opened in India. We opened in 1951 as a commitment to our relationship with Ireland, and ever since there's been a number of high-level visits. As I mentioned also that in the future, when the pandemic situation settles and the restrictions allow us, we are working on two major visits, which is of the highest level, the President of India to Ireland, and hopefully the Taoiseach would visit India as well. So these, there are state of visits which will continue. St. Patrick's Day, the Irish minister has a tradition of going to India as well. We hope this will continue as well. So we will continue to, put all these political elements and strengthen them so that they can provide a very solid base for the businesses to get interested in expanding relationships in each other's countries.
Thank you, Sandeep. Brendan?
Yes, as Sandeep said, the relationship at the political level, it does go back quite a long way. As you mentioned as well, we are currently both elected members of the UN Security Council, and we have regular consultations in New York between our delegations to coordinate positions on the major international issues. We also had consultations between foreign ministries on our UN Security Council membership just a few weeks ago. As to visits, yes, I'm quite conscious, having been here about 18 months now, that we haven't had an exchange of high-level official visits. Obviously, for the last 12 months, that has been pretty well impossible. But we are examining a possible program of visits over the next 2 or 3 years to try and deepen the political relationship. I have one particular minister in mind myself for a visit in October, November. But as I haven't actually consulted him about it yet, I don't suppose I can talk about it here. I see we have a question as well on the question of direct flights between the two countries. And this is also something which we are quite keen to promote. We have an air transport agreement with India, so the possibilities are there. And we have been in contact a number of times with the major Indian airlines with a view to encouraging them to look at Dublin, both for tourism purposes and also to service the fairly large Indian community in Ireland and the increasing number of business travelers between our two countries. In India and Ireland, as elsewhere, the aviation sector will take a while to recover. So I would see that as an aspiration over the next 3 years rather than something likely to happen in the next few months.
Thank you. There's just a couple of other questions left. I think somebody had a question on opening a company in Ireland for an Indian national resident in Ireland. I'm not aware of any particular problems with doing that, but maybe if you contact Annalise and the IIBA can point you in the right direction to help you out with that, and maybe next steps on that might be a good starting point of that. There's also a question on more capital markets type of cooperation. My impression on that is that is at the level of the EU, India kind of trade and investment sort of agreement that was referenced earlier, and those discussions that might be starting off. But I'm open to correction on that if anybody is. But I do know there's quite a lot happening in the funds area and in the debt raising area on that particular side at the moment. We're just a little bit over time, and apologies, even though we started a little bit early, late. I think it's usually best to try and bring it to an end at around time, and I know everybody has diaries. Can I ask one last question just of people, and we put this in a post COVID type of situation, i.e. when we can travel again. Could I ask each of Sandeep and Brendan to let us know kind of where would you, Sandeep, you first, where would you recommend people, if there was one place in India that you would recommend people to go, where would it be? And is there one special place in Ireland that you could call out? I'll give Brendan a chance to think about it.
Liam, that's actually a very difficult question because India is just too vast, too complex to be straitjacketed into a single formula or to be defined by any one single definition. So there's so much, in different parts of India which are so different from the others, and it all depends what interests you have, whether it is the beaches or whether it's the mountains or the climate. But two favorite counties of mine in India would be Rajasthan, which is the province of color, of forts and palaces, of grandeur and loftiness. And my second would be in the south in Kerala, where you have the sunshine. It's called God's own country. It's the land of Ayurveda and yoga and traditional lifestyle systems. So these are two very different states, one in the north, one in the south, but both very beautiful and offering different activities to the tourists. And coming to Ireland itself, again, it's got a different, it's beautiful, it's got that wild nature, the oceans lapping against the rocks, the rugged mountains, the rocks, etc. So, but if I were to choose, I would choose Kerry and I would choose Clare for just the breathtaking landscapes, the forts, the castles, the lighthouses. But I'm just overpowered by the beauty, the rugged beauty of Ireland.
Thank you, Sandy. Spoken like a true diplomat. Brendan.
Well, funnily enough, Sandeep mentioned both Rajasthan and Kerala. And as it happens, about 3 weeks ago, I was in Rajasthan, not visiting the famous palaces and the beautiful princely cities, but at a wildlife reserve where, for the first time ever, I saw a tiger in the wild breakfasting on a freshly killed buffalo. And I have to say the experience was quite amazing. So certainly anybody coming to India should take advantage of the many wildlife reserves and the opportunity to see nature red in tooth and claw. It also happens that last week, Easter week, I spent in Kerala, which is, a very beautiful part of India. It's also very different from Delhi, from northern India, the Hindi belt. They have a completely different language, in many ways, very different culture, and great natural beauty. It's also worth pointing out that I think 9% of nurses currently working in Ireland come from India, and the overwhelming majority of them also are from Kerala. Now, as to Ireland, this is a rather difficult choice for an Irish ambassador, but I think somebody coming to Ireland who is interested in rugged natural beauty, my recommendation would be to head for Donegal in the extreme northwest of the country rather than Kerry, because it offers the rugged beauty of the Atlantic coast and yet is, well, as much as anything in a small country like Ireland can be, relatively uncrowded. And then for the urban experience, I think I would strongly recommend Ireland's smallest city, Kilkenny, which still retains a lot of its medieval and Renaissance architecture and charm, and hosts a number of very entertaining, very interesting cultural festivals during the year. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you. Sandeep?
Can I just quickly step in and say it's very nice of Brendan to talk about all his various travels, even during the time of pandemic, and talking to us, troubling us, and making us totally envious of him while we are stuck in lockdowns and not able to go out and to see a single person. So I'm really, really envious of Brendan.
I think that's a fair comment. I am certainly looking forward to getting to the mountains. Like the Wicklow Mountains are just within 20 kilometers of me for next weekend, so it'll be a blessing to be able to get out again. Thank you.
There's also, it talks about the huge vaccination drive in India, which makes these conditions possible for people to be able to get out. There have been more than 100 million people who have been doses which have been administered over the last 3 months, sorry, and there is a robust vaccine rollout program. We have also delivered vaccines, 65 million doses of vaccines to 85 countries as part of our global and regional responsibilities. So I just wanted to put that in context as well, to manage a pandemic with 1.3 billion people, and yet we've been able to roll out 100 million doses of vaccines so far, which allows people like Brendan and others to, have some kind of a normal living while we are still confined to our homes.
Thank you, Sandy. Important to get that in at the end. Thank you to both ambassadors this morning. It has been a fascinating hour. Apologies to everyone for the slight little hiccups at the start with the IT, but I think the conversation that ensued was worth it. Plenty of insights there. I've been writing pages and pages of stuff here coming out of the comments from both ambassadors. It has been a very informative and interesting discussion this morning. I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to just mention that kind of obviously the India chapter will be, of the IIBA will be starting up soon. We're also in the middle of updating and producing our new strategy, which we'll be rolling out over the next while. And the importance of doing that in both building the profile of Ireland in India and India and Ireland, and also building the knowledge and the place that people can come to in setting up business and trading between our two countries and through our two countries is going to be central to that. I look forward to bringing that to all of you very soon. So thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you.